For antiwar.com, I'm Scott Horton. This is Anti-War Radio. Introducing Dr. Gareth Porter. He's an independent historian and journalist, writes regularly for IPS News. You can find all his IPS stuff at antiwar.com/Porter. Although, I bet now it's original.antiwar.com/Porter or something along those lines. Anyway, you can find his name right there on the right-hand front of the page there at antiwar.com. Welcome back to the show, Gareth. How are you?
Thanks, Scott. Good, as always.
That's good to know. All right, so brand new piece here. Al-Maliki draws U.S. troops into crackdown on Sunnis. And, I almost called you, and I thought, I better just wait until the new piece comes out. But I knew you'd write about this.
You did. You had a sense that would be the story?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about exactly the headline here, but your analysis of what happened last weekend with the Shiite-dominated Dawa Party, Supreme Islamic Council government of Nouri al-Maliki and the Sons of Iraq, the conflict with the former insurgents, now known as concerned local citizens. I guess why don't you, first of all, give us a background about who's who for the newbies, and then explain what happened last weekend, and then exactly all your Byzantine politics behind the scenes there.
I mean, the background, of course, is that you have essentially a struggle for power, which has been going on now ever since the U.S. Invasion of Iraq and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein regime, unleashing the Shia and Sunni forces, particularly, of course, the Shia who had not been in power, who had been subject of Sunni-dominated regimes for so many decades, were suddenly given the opportunity to come to power through elections in 2005 and again in early 2005 and then again at the end of 2005, early 2006, and forming a Shia-dominated government then, a permanent government in 2006. At the same time, you had a Sunni insurgency, which during 2005-2006 increasingly became conflicted, divided between those who were willing to continue to ally themselves with al-Qaeda in Iraq and those Sunni insurgents who turned against al-Qaeda. And I think the latter undoubtedly represented the broader, the larger segment of Sunni society and the Sunni insurgency, and a very large proportion of those ultimately then decided to take advantage of an offer from the United States to come in from the cold, as it were, and form these, what were called awakening councils, or Sawa in Arabic, but the Americans tended to call Sons of Iraq, the local neighborhood security organizations, which were paid by the United States, $300 a month per person, per head, and which thus really represented a significant part of the Sunni community in terms of potential military power there, potential manpower. I mean, this is nearly 100,000, roughly 100,000 Sunnis who are armed, who are in neighborhoods, who are in organized units, and therefore, from the Shia point of view, they represent a significant threat to the regime, particularly those, of course, in the greater Baghdad area. That's really primarily what the al-Maliki regime was concerned about, and also in Diyala province, not too far away from Baghdad. So it was those were the neuralgic areas in terms of this potential Sunni military power, real military power, but potentially could be used against the regime from the point of view of the Shia-dominated government. So that sets up this conflict, which has existed really ever since the Americans set up the Awakening Councils. Al-Maliki has never made any secret of the fact that he did not like, and does not like the Awakening Councils. And he has made various moves over the past year and a half or so, last 2 years really, indicating that he's not going to really tolerate them, that he intends to deal with them in his own way. What is really interesting here is that the United States, viewing the Awakening Councils as both, in a way, the success story in their counterinsurgency narrative, if you will, the Petraeus counterinsurgency narrative, and also really a kind of counterbalance to a pro-Iranian regime, a Shia regime which clearly leans more towards Iran than towards the United States in the broader geopolitical picture of the Middle East. The United States nevertheless agreed, under pressure from al-Maliki last October, to turn over control of this program to the Shia government of Iraq. That's a major shift in U.S. policy to do that, a major concession to al-Maliki and to the Iraqi government.
And he's barely paid any of them since.
That's right. I mean, exactly when the payment stop is not clear, but the reports clearly indicate that at least for the last month or two, they have not been paid. The Americans try to pass this off as just a bureaucratic glitch, but clearly there's more to it than that. This represents part of a broader strategy to bring these people to heel. And another part of it, the really sharp edge of end of the lance, as it were, is a program or a campaign to pick off individual commanders of the Awakening Councils, particularly in Baghdad, as I say, and in Diyala province. This has been going on really since last summer. We don't have any figures, interestingly. I've never seen any precise figures or estimates of how many of these Sunni commanders have in fact been detained so far, but clearly a number of them have been. And it has now resumed, and for the first time, the last weekend, one of the popular Sunni commanders having been detained, his loyal Sunni followers went into an uprising in a Baghdad neighborhood, Fadil, and they were then repressed by government troops going in with the active participation of U.S. ground forces and helicopters involved in the operation. So this is a real turning point. The United States, for the first time, actively involved in military action, suppressing essentially the very allies that the United States had counted on to sort of maintain peace and quiet in Baghdad, parts of Baghdad which were Sunni majority. And this bespeaks a pretty big decision on the part of the U.S. military command in Baghdad, which I think has some very far-reaching implications.
Well, do you think that they know exactly what they're doing? I mean, this seems sure to provoke further reactions and consequences down the line. Is that why they did it? Or did they think, did they maybe...
that as a rhetorical question, Scott.
Well, I mean, did they maybe buy Maliki's narrative that, listen, we're just going to get this one guy, or we're just going to target this one group because they're bad guys, but... Or is there a real policy here to turn against the concerned local citizens?
This is clearly a complicated issue. There's no single one factor that explains what's going on here. I think, like many other broad shifts in U.S. policy and U.S. strategy and in the war itself, you have a convergence of more than one factor that accounts for this shift. But I would start with the point that the Bush administration, the White House, had decreed that the United States is going to support al-Maliki come hell or high water. And Bush did that against the judgment of some people in the State Department and in the military who believed that al-Maliki was a bit too close to Iran for comfort and wanted a more nuanced policy that would, really put al-Maliki's feet to the fire and, try to to wheedle and coax and pressure him to do things that he might not wanted to do. And the White House never bought that, and U.S. policy then became essentially one of supporting the elected government. And I think now that there is a certain sort of a momentum that has been built up over the past couple of years behind that policy that the U.S. military has gotten behind, and that it's difficult for them to then change course and really sort of separate itself openly from the Baghdad regime. And of course, the more immediate implication of that, or perhaps I should say more immediate element of that, is that the U.S. military role there is very closely tied up with partnering with the Iraqi military.
Which means also in effect that this whole awakening thing, this ceasefire with the Sunni insurgency, has just been temporary.